I promised you the nitty gritty, the step-by-step, how to evict a tenant in the state of Pennsylvania, and you're gonna get just that in today's video. I'm Jennifer Rulins, landlord, educator, advocate, and broker of One Focus Property Management. This is the second of a 4-part video series on how to evict a tenant in the state of Pennsylvania, specifically residential tenants. In the first video, I explained how to get ready, how to prepare, and how to post the notice to quit. If you didn't catch that one, go back, watch that one first. This is an in-detail, step-by-step guide, so you really can't skip one video. So where we left off, we had posted that notice to quit, marked our calendar for the number of days we had to wait, and now we're at the point where the time has arrived to file or not. And so what you're trying to decide here is if what you asked that tenant to fix on their notice to quit has been fixed or not. So if there was a balance that they owed you, did they pay that balance in full? If it was to remove an animal from the property, did they do that? If it was to maintain the lawn and snow removal, did they do that? So you can see this is their opportunity to fix the problem. We're working on the assumption they have not fixed the problem, and it's time to file the landlord-tenant complaint. The first step in this process is figuring out which district court you're going to be filing in. That is based on the rental property address, the tenant's address, not your address. And so what you're going to do, you're going to go online and go to this website. This website will allow you to do a search for magisterial courts in the state by county. You can pull up your county, and it's really not scientific. You think there'd be a map or an opportunity to put an address in, but you don't. Pick the courthouse that is closest to your rental property, call the clerk and ask. We do this sometimes at One Focus when we're not really clear about which courthouse it's going to be at. We call the one we think it's going to be, we provide them the address, and they must have a piece of software or a map that they can refer to and tell you the right court. Once you've found the right court, now it's time to get some paperwork together. In order to get the forms to complete to get ready for your filing, you're going to go to this website. Once there, you're going to scroll down to the landlord section. You're going to need to download 2 different forms, the landlord-tenant complaint and the civil service members relief affidavit. You need to download and complete both of those, but don't worry, we'll go through it in detail. So let's review how to fill these out. I'm going to go through 2 examples with you here today, one for non-payment and one for an immaterial breach. I'm going to show you the filing on the screen, and you'll follow along as I show you how we complete our filings to be submitted to the courts. So let's get started with this first landlord-tenant complaint. This is for a non-payment filing. At the very top of the page, you must write in the county you're filing in. In the box below, you must list the court number. That every magisterial district court has a court number, and on that first website I sent you to, you'll be able to find that number for the court. You'll also list the judge's name, address, and phone number. Then on the right, you will put your name and address and the tenant's names and addresses. Any adult in the property needs to be listed on this regardless of whether they are listed on the lease or not. If I believe that somebody is living in the property and is not on the lease, or I don't know their name, I'll often put et al. At the end of the name. So John Doe, Jane Doe, et al., encompassing any other people that are in their party. It's a technique that I learned at one point that I haven't really seen work or not work. It's not really come up where it's been challenged. Okay, back to the form here. So now moving below the line, you'll indicate whether the property is residential or not. Then to the right, you'll list the monthly rent and the amount of any security deposit you're holding. Then you're going to select the boxes here that apply to your situation. If you're going for non-payment only, you will select these boxes and the amounts to the right. I typically add a breakdown of the delinquent balance in this center area. You can see I listed out how much was rent and how much was late fees. But there could potentially be other charges on there. I would just detail what they were and what constitutes that balance that's delinquent. You select the second box that says you're seeking any additional rent remaining due and unpaid on the hearing date. This is useful in the event that another rent payment becomes due between the time you are filing the complaint and the hearing when you expect to receive the judgment. Moving down to this line, you will complete the tenant address, and number 3 will apply if you have a subtenant in the property. Then you need to answer 4 and 5. Just answer 4 honestly. And number 5, you will select the last option. The first option is for when tenant is in holdover. The second is when they are not complying with the lease requirements that are not about payment. Then finally, you will put your name here and sign here. You will take this along with the filing fee, and the clerk will tell you how much the filing fee is when you file. So that was doing a landlord-tenant complaint for non-payment. In this example, we're going to do a landlord-tenant complaint for non-compliance or immaterial breach. The example in this case is the tenant has moved an animal into the property. This isn't permitted under the lease, and they don't have permission for this. So let's get into this one. Okay, so in this example, the top section above the line is the same here as it was in the last example. Below the line, you still enter the details of your lease here, and then select this box, since we have the same concern as with the other example. Rent could become due and go unpaid between the filing and the hearing date. The next difference is in number 5. You're going to select the second option and detail the violation you are seeking judgment on. Recently, the court started requiring the Service Member Civil Relief Act affidavit. This is a one-page affidavit that asks you, the landlord, to tell the courts what you know about the tenant's military service and whether they're currently engaged in military service. You need this document when you file your landlord-tenant complaint, so you must prepare it. Now, you might very well know for sure that they are in the military or for sure that they aren't, just from knowing them as your tenant. But you also might not have any idea. At the bottom of this page, when we review it, there's a link to go to take the steps to figure it out. But let's get started and look at it. This is a really simple form. On the top left, you're just simply going to fill in your name, the tenant's name. On the third line down, you don't need to worry about the docket or case number in the top right. The courts will fill that out for you. You don't have it at the time of filing. They'll assign it once you filed. And on the affidavit portion, you'll see that you have to fill in the landlord's name there. And number 3, select A, B, or C. Just simply select what you honestly know. But in number 4, say what you base that on. So if you're saying they have military, they're in the military, why do you believe that to be true? If you're saying that they're not, why? And even if you have to say that you're unable to determine, in that box number 4, what they're really asking for you to do is make an attempt. At the very bottom of the page, you'll see in the note, there's a website where you can access people's military service. And it seems like the courts are asking us to take that step. You would sign this, and this would simply accompany the filing. Once you've prepared your paperwork, your landlord-tenant complaint, and your affidavit, you're going to gather that and a form of payment and go to the court. You'll simply walk in, hand the paperwork to the clerk, and explain that you're filing a landlord-tenant complaint. They'll look at your paperwork and calculate the fee. The fee is usually between $150 and $200. This depends on the court, and it depends on the facts of your case. So that fee can vary depending on how many people are on your lease and how large of a balance is owed. The clerk will take your paperwork, tell you the fee, you'll pay the fee, they'll provide you a receipt, and either be able to ask you just to wait a few minutes while they check the judge's calendar and schedule your hearing right then so that you know when it's going to be. Otherwise, they'll ask you to go home and send you that date in the mail. They will not call you and tell you. So if you want to know it sooner than it'll arrive to you in the mail, you'll have to call the courts in the days just following to see what's been scheduled. Now, this hearing will be scheduled for 7 to 15 days after your filing. If you are unable to attend on the date that has been scheduled, you have the option to ask the judge for a continuance. Simply write a short letter about what kind of continuance you need, meaning postponement. Perhaps you have an inescapable medical procedure, you have travel planned for that time, and you need to get it rescheduled. It's up to the judge whether a continuance is issued, but typically they're pretty generous with those. Now we're getting ready for the hearing. So we're going to get that documentation I talked about in the first part of this video series. We're going to prepare the lease, any account ledger, and any documentation or evidence of what's been going on that I want to talk to the judge about. So I'll want to have evidence of my posting the notice to quit. I'll want to have any sort of photos, inspections, communications with the tenant in regards to my attempt to remedy this issue. Remember, the judge does not want to look at your phone. So if you're going to enter into evidence things like text messages, emails, or photos, they really need to be printed out. Now, when you present any kind of evidence to the judge, it's expected that you have another copy to provide to the tenant, the other opposing party, so that they can also look at the documentation that's being provided. So we'll gather all the documentation and then make copies. We have a copy for ourselves, a copy to give the judge, and a copy to give the tenant if they wish to inspect it. Now, sometimes your evidence is going to be based in witnesses. So perhaps there's a neighbor or someone, a maintenance technician who's seen the animal in the property, or whatever the violation is. You bring that person in to testify. So we've got to be a little familiar here about what we can testify to, things we've directly seen. We don't want to be bringing hearsay. And you simply can invite those people to come to the hearing. Now, if they're unwilling to come, or if it's a police officer, typically you'll have to subpoena them to show up to the hearing. It's not a complicated process, but you will need to do that. And I've done that in several cases where police have responded to events at the property. And because the police reports are often redacted, I can't use a police report as evidence of what happened. I do use the police report to figure out the officer that responded, so I can subpoena the appropriate officer to testify in my eviction proceedings. So you'll want to make sure those people are prepared and ready, that they know what's expected of them, where to be, and when. It's time for the hearing. Show up at the courthouse just 5 minutes early. You don't have to be any earlier than that. And you'll want to check in with the clerk. So simply let the clerk know that you're here for your hearing at such and such time, and make sure you're aware of where to wait so that when they call you, you'll hear and be ready to go back. These are typically small waiting rooms in the district courts, and it is very possible your tenant, if they choose to attend the hearing, will be in the same waiting room as you. And when I say small, these are very small spaces with maybe 4 to 5 chairs. There's not a lot of space to be spread out, so it's important you have control of your emotions and you're ready for that interaction. I like to take the opportunity, if a tenant does appear, to put them at ease, to explain a little bit about what's going to happen when we're in the courtroom, what they can expect from the judge, and to again make myself or my team available for questions. The goal is not to scare the tenant. The goal is not to intimidate them. The goal is simply to get lease compliance or get the property back. And so I'd like to take that moment to calm them down, because they also don't go to court regularly. This isn't a usual occurrence for them, and they're very scared. So we're in the waiting room together. If they're there with me, I just take that opportunity to ask them, and I do it very simply. I say, have you ever been to one of these before? And usually they'll say no, and I'll say, okay. So when we go in, we'll sit at the left table. You'll sit at the left table. I'll sit at the right. When the judge enters, we'll stand up. I just give them a couple tips. You can expect the judge to come in and call the hearing into order. He or she will usually announce the facts of the case from the landlord-tenant complaint, and then they start with the landlord. And some judges will ask you questions one at a time in order to kind of walk you through the process. Other judges want you to kind of present the facts of your case on your own. When the judges walk you through this is a very kind and courteous maneuver that they do to make the hearing go smoothly, because we're not attorneys in this situation, right? We're not familiar with being in courtrooms. So they can either walk you through it, or if you have the type of judge who likes to ask you to present your case, it can be a little nerve-wracking. At One Focus, we've learned the staff member who's going to represent the owner at the hearing just practices before they go presenting their case and answering routine questions about the facts of the case so that they're ready. That's a tip from me to you that you might really find some luck with. So once the judge has started the hearing, it's typically the plaintiff or the landlord's opportunity to go first. They'll ask you to present the facts of your case or walk you through it, and that's your chance to present any evidence or call any witnesses. If you call witnesses, once you're done with your questioning of them, the opposing party or the tenant will get to do the same. Once you're finished, the tenant will get an opportunity to present their case, any evidence they decide to bring, and call any witnesses. Now, after that part has finished, you can expect the judge might have some questions. If the judge asks questions of you, answer only the question that you are asked. Answer it succinctly. You don't want to argue and you don't want to be combative with the judge. That will lose you any sort of forgiveness or grace that they're offering you, knowing that you're inexperienced at this. In most cases, the judge will make a decision right there or issue a judgment. Sometimes the facts of the case will require them to take some time and they'll make a commitment to have a decision to you in so long of a time. But that's pretty uncommon. Typically, they'll make a decision on the spot. The judge will then explain the conditions of that decision, the appeal period the tenant has, and how that can be explored. It'll also outline the number of days you have to wait until the next step of the process. And so this can be confusing, but I'll tell you, judges have a lot of concern to make sure that you understand their judgments. This is your opportunity to ask questions. It can seem rude or impertinent to ask questions in a courtroom of a judge when they're issuing the judgment, but they will ask you if you understand, and they mean to have you answer that question truthfully. It is very difficult to get in contact with a judge after a hearing to ask clarifying questions. So please don't hesitate and don't leave the courtroom until you understand absolutely everything about the judgment that was ordered. Because even if you win, your job is far from done. In the next video, we're going to cover what happens after the hearing and how you get your property back. In the fourth video in the series, I'm going to answer your most frequently asked questions and anything you want to know more about this process. If you are watching this video because you're having problems with your rental properties and enforcing your leases, and you're near Danville, Williamsport, or Lock Haven, Pennsylvania, I hope you'll call One Focus Property Management. We are the experts in this space, and we do so much more than just enforce your lease. We help you with the strategy of your portfolio so it does what you need it to do, which is make and earn you money. I love making these videos for you. I hope you enjoy them. Give us a like and share and a subscribe, and I'll see you next week.